Breath of Fire 3 is a beloved classic JRPG that generally doesn't take itself too seriously. It's wacky and colorful, but don't let its vivid surface fool you because this game is really messed up. I'm talking war, ecological disaster, and a smattering of Gnosticism that's sure to pique the curiosity of any player. It's a breath of fresh air from the start, omitting the dreaded 20-hour JRPG tutorial for a brisk opening that gets right to the point. The prologue at McNeil Village is simply brilliant. You start off getting acquainted with the village and your new companions, Tipo and Ray, with wacky hijinks ensuing, but harsh lessons about the adult world quickly seep their way in. As one of the villagers, Bunyan, gets tired of your thievery, he tasks us with killing a monster who has been terrorizing the village. This is where you encounter the most stomach-churning gut punch of a twist that you'll ever be dealt in a JRPG. The Niue has children. Not just any children, but dead ones that it's been trying to protect and feed. It was at that moment I realized I wasn't playing any ordinary JRPG. I was playing a masterpiece. I never really gave the enemies any thought that I'd been fighting up until this point, but it got me thinking about their situations. Maybe they all have families that I've been cutting down too, but it teaches the player about the danger of having power, which is so important to the central themes of the game. It's so effective because it communicates those themes without stating a single piece of dialogue. The player gets to experience the consequences of their actions by their own filthy, greasy hands. It portrays how disillusioning aging can be perfectly. On top of that, players will also realize that this seemingly simple and peaceful village is ruled by a corrupt, greedy slob. Not just McNeil Village, but many of the places that you visit in Breath of Fire 3 are run by criminal syndicates, while Ryu, Tipo, and Ray, who don't steal out of malice, are stuck in a cycle of poverty due to society rejecting them. Even the environment ends up being exploited with Chrism. The Chrism is actually the result of fossilized remains of the Brood, and ironically enough ends up causing the Desert of Death to expand. It's almost karmic in that way. Breath of Fire 3 usually features the sentient beings as nothing more than commodities. The fairies are used as glorified labor, and the creatures are created in labs and only act on instinct. Naturally, you'd think after taking care of McNeil, everything will look up, but once again, the consequences of your actions will bite you, and this time the price is your friends. You won't get to see them for a very long time, so first-time players might assume they're actually dead. Breath of Fire 3 does the coming-of-age cliche right, as it violently pulls the blissful ignorance of the world into shreds. Behind that facade of quirkiness is a very bleak and violent world. The world has been engulfed in a cyclical war involving those who harness the power of the Brood and the Guardians. The god of the universe, Miria, is responsible for this genocide of the Brood, which in turn means we set our sights on God. Everybody knows you end up killing the god at the end of JRPGs, but why is that? There's a couple reasons I'd like to look at, and one of them is Gnosticism. Now, I've talked about Gnosticism plenty on this channel, so if you're already educated on the subject, feel free to skip ahead. In Gnosticism, the creator of the material world is not a kind and loving one, but a malevolent and flawed deity. In the process, they also end up making the material world equally as flawed. Gnosticism was actually pretty big in Japan. It aligned with a lot of values of Shinto Buddhism. Ignorance is portrayed as the true evil of the universe, and the material world is also seen as an illusion. Other reasons I would posit would be the idea of a flawed creator being popular in other works that were heavily influential in Japan, like Elric of Melniboné, Lovecraft, and Devilman. If you would like to support me or this channel, please consider becoming a member today. The lowest tier starts only at 99 cents, and you get early access to my videos, badges, and even member-exclusive videos. You can support this channel also by visiting my Redbubble link down below and buying some of the art that I make. You could print it on shirts, stickers, or even artboards. Thank you. There's some pretty obvious inspiration behind Miria's boss, and the images associated with the Demiurge is often portrayed as a serpentine creature. Miria's intentions aren't necessarily bad, but her endgame results in the death of an entire race of people. I think her good intentions being harmful is just like the Niue protecting its dead babies. It's trying to protect the very thing it loves so much, but it ends up doing more harm than good. She's more of an overprotective parent than an outright malicious deity. She removes the character's ability to be truly free, and instead they live in a safe, static environment. In Gnosticism, there is also the concept of gnosis, which is a personal awakening that leads to one to seek mystical truths about the world so they can liberate themselves. The cast all end up tossing aside their lifestyles for the sake of pursuing the ultimate truth of the world. Your party mostly consists of other outcasts, but Gar acts as the strongest example of gnosis. Also, what would a JRPG be without a little bit of Friedrich Nietzsche and the concept of death of God? Nietzsche often viewed religion as a way to stifle human progress and innovation, which is exactly what Miria is attempting to do. They did all this stuff a year before Xenogears got to the punch, might I add. The will to power is also evident as our group in the true ending reject the sheltering existence and choose a future that undoubtedly will mean hardship. The true meaning is found in our adversity over living in a fabricated paradise. Ryu and his band act on Nietzsche's concept of the Übermensch, which is an individual who rises above traditional values and seeks to create their own value system. Ryu can either sacrifice himself or seek revenge on his oppressors, but he chooses to transcend that bloody cycle. He isn't swayed by either Miria's plead or his ancestors' trauma. Tipo is like the exact opposite of the group. Instead, he prefers to live in his perfect artificial environment instead of living out the messy and harsh reality. I think he's actually the most relatable character in all of Breath of Fire 3 because most of us are like him. Most people aren't willing to take on the burden of suffering to become like Ryu or the rest of the group. People like their beautiful lives no matter if it ends up biting them in the tail later on. There is a certain level of insanity that all the party members end up admitting to on their quest to defy fate. Most of them are naturally frightened, but go on to an incredible extent to see out their plan. I think that they are more capable of spearheading such an impossible task than anyone, because they aren't in a position to lose much of anything. Ryu, Nina, and Momo are all children of the broken system that can see through the lies of the world clearly. They aren't chained down by the haunting memories and allegiances of the past like someone like Gar. Ryu also carries some of that weight, but it's not in the same vein. So you have two survivors of horrible tragedies that have to learn to break that cycle. With such characters, it only makes sense that the failed cage of utopia would come crumbling down. Nature itself rejects the idea of perfect control over something. Life will find a way and whatnot, because Miria views death and pain more so as bugs of the system when they are intrinsic parts of the human experience. If you were to eliminate those parts of your life, you eliminate the human experience in its entirety. She's not wrong in her hatred for that suffering, but pain is often a very formative part of many people's lives that help them grow. If Ryu and Gar hadn't experienced the devastating losses they did over the game, they might not have grown or made peace with each other. They wouldn't be able to see past the historical facts of the world and help it heal. Many of the communities that the party helps along the way might not have improved or escaped the wrath of Balayo and Sunder. The final confrontation with Miria isn't a heroic triumph necessarily, but a need to cut ties from an overprotective parent. The thing that gets me about the ending too is it doesn't show you whether this was the absolute right decision. You're left with your own moral choices at the end of the game with nothing but a horizon of sand and heat. The true ending of this game feels a lot more weighty and antithetical to other JRPG endings. Although it feels like we won, there's an air of uncertainty that other games lack. Just a couple scenes ago too, it's made even more heartbreaking by Miria's final words where she expresses regret. It's extremely bittersweet because she was really convinced that what she was doing was right. Top that off with the loss of Gar, who unceremoniously ends up dying off screen, and Pico staying behind. Pico ends up being a deeply important character to the plot, despite his seemingly innocent nature. He acts as a tether to the Tree of Yggdrasil, which is taken from Norse mythology, and acts as a tree of life. Pico was already the best character in the game, don't debate me on that, but this makes his character incredibly symbolic. Pico starts off as a spawn of one of the bosses and is born from destruction. Much like the state of the in-game world, destruction is sometimes necessary to cleanse the world and start all over again. This is where Breath of Fire 3's ties to Buddhism are most notable. Aside from certain terminology taken from the game like prana and the rainbow Hagoromo, Gar is another direct example. The Urkon people are very spiritual, and Gar dresses in a very similar fashion to how monks do. What Gar really attempts to seek is karmic absolution, which is a spiritual release from past actions. JRPGs are usually the deeper games in the industry, but Breath of Fire 3 goes to another level. It takes a lot of traditional cliches of the genre and subverts them. Miria is not some malicious deity, but an anxious and overprotective god. It's not just a coming-of-age story, but a sprawling adventure to find one's true purpose. Outside of the fun gameplay, cool dragons, and awesome artwork, there is a core to it that is incredibly profound. That to me is why Breath of Fire 3 is an absolute classic, even ranking above other JRPGs in the golden age that was the PS1.